Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something really critical, I think, for anyone in MedTech, especially QA and RA. It's this paradox, huge commercial success, but underneath, a potentially catastrophic risk just waiting.
It really is the ultimate stress test for a company's systems. And our mission today, well, it's a proper deep dive into a major case study, the Boston Scientific WATCHMAN TruSeal Access System Class 1 recall.
That specific one, yeah.
We've gone through the data MAUDE reports, the 510KS, the official recall info, that's event ID 97363. We want to figure out why this hazard popped up and, honestly, what it teaches us about our vigilance systems today.
And what makes this one so compelling, I think, is that the root cause wasn't what you typically expect, like a faulty component or a bad batch.
No, not at all.
It was this subtle procedural hazard, something in the workflow, how clinicians were actually using the device. And that only really surfaced when it went massive globally. It's a huge lesson about looking beyond just the device itself.
Absolutely. It highlights that vulnerability right where the technology meets, well, human variability at scale.
Okay, so let's unpack the event itself, the Class 1 recall. What happened?
So the main event kicked off around July 2025. It was for the WATCHMAN TruSeal Access System. That's the catheter they use, product code DQY. And Class 1, well, that's the FDA's highest alert level.
Meaning potential for serious harm or even death.
Right, exactly. The specific danger identified was air embolism, basically air getting into the system, into the left atrium, during prep or when swapping devices. And the risk was found to be higher, significantly higher, when the procedure wasn't done under positive pressure ventilation, think conscious or deep sedation scenarios.
Right, where you might get that negative pressure gradient drawing air in.
Precisely. That's the critical condition.
And the scale here was, well, it was huge, wasn't it?
Oh, massive. The recall hit all non-expired batches. We're talking approximately 340,185 units worldwide distribution.
Wow, so this wasn't some isolated issue. It was baked into the system, potentially affecting hundreds of thousands of procedures.
It was systemic exposure, yes. But it's really important to frame the risk accurately. Boston Scientific's own analysis, their internal numbers, estimated the actual reported global rate of air embolism was quite low.
How low?
Around 0.06% of procedures, which sounds tiny.
It does.
But, and this is the crucial part, the associated death rate, while even rarer, was estimated at about 0.0009% of cases.
And that's the classic QARA nightmare, isn't it? Low frequency, but incredibly high severity. Even a handful of tragic outcomes triggers a massive response.
Exactly. That's the Class 1 trigger.
So, face it this, what did the company do immediately? What was the strategy?
Their first move was quick. They issued an urgent field safety notice dated July 29, 2025. But here's the key strategic point. They did not pull the devices from the market.
Wait, really? They left potentially 340,000 units out there?
Yeah.
With a known Class 1 risk? That sounds bold. How do they justify that from a quality standpoint?
It's a pivotal decision, absolutely. The rationale was that the root cause wasn't deemed to be a flaw in the device itself, its physical design or manufacture.
Okay.
It was identified as procedural, a gap in air management practices during use. So removing the product wouldn't fix the core issue, and it would disrupt patient care.
So the fix was information, not removal.
Exactly. The action focused entirely on mitigation through better guidance, updating the instructions for use, the IFUs, and significantly enhancing physician training.
What kind of updates?
Things like explicitly stating to keep the access system valve below heart level during device exchanges, making sure the patient wasn't hypovolemic, properly hydrated, really nailing down the air purging steps. The solution was procedural control.
Okay, that makes more sense. They shifted the control point to the user's workflow.
Precisely. Which leads us right into this idea of the regulatory blind spot. If the device design was okay, how did this procedural risk sneak through multiple generations of the product?
Right, because this wasn't the first version.
Not at all. You look at the 510K history, TruSeal first, K1800864, then the FXD curve, K2122288, and then Trusteer, K2400018. Each one got clearance by showing it was substantially equivalent mechanically to the one before it.
And there's the potential gap. The 510K process, it's heavily focused on the device itself, right? Bench test dimensions, leak tests, pressure, torque.
Exactly.
Design verification.
But what about validating the procedure? Especially those critical steps like purging air or doing a device exchange smoothly under pressure in a real clinical setting. Was that formally tested each time?
Well, that seems to be the blind spot. formal human factors testing, detailed procedural validation for those key, potentially risky steps. It appears it was largely omitted or not rigorously revisited with each iteration.
So the assumption that the existing procedure was fine just got carried forward.
It looks that way, because that regulatory continuity preserved untested assumptions about the procedure. The hazard was latent, invisible on the benchtop. It only really became visible statistically when the platform hit massive scale. And how big was the scale by then?
Over 500,000 patients treated worldwide by 2024.
Wow. And the timing of this recall, didn't it coincide with a period of major growth for WATCHMAN?
Terribly timed, yes. It happened just months after 2024, which was, by all accounts, WATCHMAN's most successful year. Big boost from launching the newer TruSteal system.
The steerable one.
Right. And critically, they were expanding into more community hospitals, not just major academic centers.
Which means more variability, right?
Yeah.
More users, maybe different levels of experience, different workflows.
Exactly. Scaling up inherently amplifies your exposure to procedural variation. If a procedure works perfectly 99 times out of 100 in a controlled setting, expanding usage dramatically increases the chances you'll encounter that tricky 1% edge case. Success became the magnifying glass for the risk.
So the signal wasn't in the hardware checks. It was emerging out in the field in the post-market data. Was it obvious there? Were alarm bells ringing in the MAUDE data?
Well, this is where conventional vigilance systems can fall short. They tend to rely heavily on structured data, those predefined codes, like patient problem code 1697 for air embolism.
Standard dashboards track those codes.
Right. But here's the really interesting analytical finding. Those structured codes, they only captured about 57% of the relevant events related to air embolism for this device.
Only 57%. So where was the rest of the signal?
It was buried in the unstructured narrative text, the free-form descriptions clinicians write in the MAUE reports.
The actual stories of what happened.
Exactly. That crucial missing 43% of the signal was there, but you needed to look beyond the codes.
So narrative analytics becomes key, using things like keyword analysis, looking for terms. What kind of terms?
Things like air, gas, bubble, purge, flush, prep, difficulty exchanging, air in line, clustering those terms, looking at the context.
And that analysis, looking at the text, it actually picked up incidents that weren't formally coded as air embolism, but were clearly related to problems with air management during the procedure.
Precisely. That kind of text analysis provided a much clearer signal of rising procedural risk. And it showed up roughly 3 to 4 months before the official Class 1 recall was initiated. There was an early warning in the text.
3 to 4 months lead time. That's significant.
It is. But what's also really compelling, maybe even more so, is the cross-manufacturer evidence. This wasn't happening in a vacuum.
What do you mean? Other companies had similar issues?
Yes. If you look back a bit earlier, 2023 into 2025, there were Abbott Access System recalls, event IDs 96545 and 92502, and they showed remarkably similar failure modes problems linked to process control or specific procedural steps with their access systems.
So similar devices, similar procedural risks cropping up across different manufacturers.
It strongly suggests an industry-wide vulnerability, specifically around managing air during transeptal access procedures, that staggered pattern, Abbott first, then Boston Scientific. It really should have been seen as a potential early warning signal across the board.
That raises a huge point for key ARA folks listening. Shouldn't competitor recalls, especially for similar device types and procedural steps, be treated as critical intelligence, triggering an internal review, not just filed away as their problem?
Absolutely, 100%. It feeds into this bigger idea that vigilance needs to be more than just compliance box ticking. It needs to be strategic intelligence gathering.
Okay. Before we jump into the big lessons learned, we should probably add a note of caution about the data, right?
Yes, definitely. It's crucial to be balanced. We're working with publicly available secondary data here, MAUE recall summaries. This data has known limitations.
Like underreporting.
Underreporting is a big one. Also, variability in how things get coded, potential biases in reporting, and crucially, we don't have the true denominator, the exact number of procedures performed to calculate precise rates.
So our findings are more associative than definitively causal.
Correct. Think of this analysis as generating strong hypotheses, highlighting critical areas for investigation, rather than providing absolute proof. We need to be careful not to overinterpret.
Understood. A necessary caveat. Okay, let's pivot then. Thinking about the QA and RA leaders, the professionals listening right now, what are the concrete, actionable takeaways from this TruSeal case they can apply?
All right, lesson number 1, and it's fundamental. Integrate narrative analytics. Seriously invest in text mining tools and skills. You have to dig into that unstructured text data to find the weak signals, the procedural nuances like issues with purge or flush that the structured codes will miss.
So go beyond the dashboard codes. Got it. What's lesson 2?
Lesson 2 tackles that regulatory gap we talked about. Bridge verification gaps. Don't just rely on the minimum 510K requirements. Proactively build rigorous human factors testing and detailed procedural validation, especially for critical steps like purging, right into your design controls from the start, even if it's not explicitly mandated for that submission pathway.
Be more thorough than the baseline requirement. Validate the user workflow under stress. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And lesson 3.
Lesson 3 expands the view. Cross-manufacturer vigilance. Treat recalls from your peers, especially those involving similar device types or procedural steps, as essential early warnings. If a competitor flags a process control issue, that should immediately trigger an internal review of your own IFUs, training, maybe even design elements related to that procedure. Don't operate in a silo.
So learn from the whole industry, not just your own data. That feels like a shift in mindset.
It is. And it connects to the bigger strategic imperative. What the TruSeal case really hammers home is that vigilance can't just be a reactive, compliance-focused function anymore, especially when a company is scaling rapidly.
It needs to keep pace with commercial success.
Exactly. It has to evolve into a strategic intelligence function. Your quality governance, your risk foresight needs to scale proportionally with your market growth and business success. When sales are booming, risk management needs to be operating at peak performance too.
It really does highlight that the limitation isn't always a lack of data. The data, particularly the narrative data, was arguably there. It was the lack of maybe the right tools or focus on contextual interpretation.
That's it perfectly. The signals were present. Unlocking them required looking differently.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners to chew on.
Yeah, maybe something provocative. I think the next generation of truly impactful QARA leaders won't just be compliance experts. They'll be the ones who can successfully make the business case for investing in things like advanced narrative analytics and robust human factors programs before a crisis hits.
Turning risk management into a value driver.
Precisely. They'll be the ones who can translate vigilance data, including those subtle signals from text and competitor events, into compelling strategic arguments for the boardroom, showing how proactive risk avoidance isn't just a cost, it's a measurable, value-creating corporate asset. The challenge is to think beyond compliance, think strategic investment in safety and quality.